After that, though, you then devoted your time to the Patriot Target AMI Pro meter. Is that correct?
That actually was in the early 2000s, maybe around 2004 or 5.
Oh, okay.
That was a little bit later.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And those meters, those would have been geared primarily toward what type of metal detector?
That was solely for the Mine Lab Sovereign.
Okay. And those meters, I can tell you this, Joe, they're considered actually a very desirable piece of equipment. Some in some quarters are considered to be collector items.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I laugh now because at the time I took a lot of heat for the price of it. The retail on that was $295. And at that time you could buy a darn good metal detector for $500.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think what a lot of people didn't get about that meter was they thought because it had an analog needle type meter that it was old technology, and nothing was further from the truth. It was so advanced inside, it was just unreal.
Well, just so we set the record straight, I know at that time there were the digital sunray meters. In fact, Mine Lab at the time, they had their own digital readout meter. What made the difference? What made the difference with the PATRIOT meter? What made that different?
First of all, I love analog meters.
So do I.
Because you can look at it and know immediately. There's no interpretation. With the digital, you have to either remember numbers. You know, there's an interpretation to it. So right off the bat, that's number one. I grew up with analog meters. I like them. The other thing is there's a lot of neat features on that meter. Some of the other meters you had to manually calibrate the meter. There's a little knob and a control that you have to, put a coin down, sweep over it, adjust that for a certain reading. With the Patriot Target Aim Pro, that calibration is all done internally with a mini computer, microcontroller. So it's very accurate, it's very fast, and it's very unique. You would basically hit what I call the auto coil push button on the front panel.
Okay.
And that auto coil stands for auto calibration of input level. So you press that button, the needle starts sweeping back and forth, back and forth. And while it's doing that, the program inside the microcontroller is looking for a signal that's about 180, 1.80. When it finds that, in other words, when you scan that quarter and it reads 180, then it starts a calibration procedure so that the needle points exactly to 180. And that way, when you're searching after you do the calibration, when you go over a dime, quarter, $half, whatever, it's going to point right to 180, right on the money.
So it would be calibrated very quickly.
Extremely accurately, yeah. That's just one of the features. I mean, I had meter backlights in there for nighttime hunting. Very brilliant. I mean, no problem seeing the display. I had a light time position where you could hit the switch and it would time out after 5 or 10 seconds, turn off automatically. I had a really neat iron circuit that would detect iron and then illuminate a red LED so that you could actually visually see when you were going across iron.
Oh, wow, that'd be great. That would have fit right in with the famous Mine Lab Iron Mask feature.
Yeah, it would be a visual way of seeing.
Well, Joe, I wanted to ask you, on the Patriot meter, that worked on the Sovereign. That meter would have worked on the Sovereign XSs?
Yeah, any Sovereign.
Okay, so it would have been any Sovereign. So that would have fit into that would have worked on the early Sovereigns that were made in the early 1990s.
Correct.
Okay, I think that's why I was a little confused on the dates on that. But that would have covered the entire Sovereign line?
Yes.
Would those work on? They still make the Sovereigns, I believe.
They make the GT.
Okay.
Right.
Would those meters work on those machines?
They will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Joe, I know that you've written a lot of articles, and also in regard to the Patriot meters. Did you have any help on those?
Actually, I did. I came up with the concept of the meter. I wanted an analog meter. When I first started working on the Patriot design, and there were many revs in between the initial design and the final design. When I first started, I was actually working on a digital meter, and I had bought a microcontroller called a basic stamp, which anybody in electronics would be familiar with. And I bought a little development kit, and I started playing
Joe, I
around
don't want
with
to
code.
interrupt you, but for those of us laypersons, what exactly is that?
Well, what it is, it's a microcontroller. It's a little chip that's a mini computer, microcontroller is what they call it. And you have to write code, software, to tell that controller what to do, certain functions, and it's typical of most products today that we have, cell phones, computers. They all have little mini computers and microcontroller chips.
So even though you had like what looked like an analog meter, you actually had a lot of digital electronic technology behind it.
It was all digital controlled. The brains of it were digital. It was from a microcontroller inside.
And that was probably due to the ignorance of that fact. You had those people saying it was old technology.
I pointed that out numerous times. I mean, it was in my literature, my brochures. I mean, I pointed out all the benefits, the accuracy, the fact that it was all controlled from a digital micro brain inside. But, the first glance, when they'd look at it and see the analog meter, nothing new here was the thought,
Oh, that's a shame.
And it is a shame because, actually, like I say, I innovated that product. I went through over a 2-year design cycle with various prototypes and revs and everything like that. And once I figured out that I wanted analog and I figured out the features and how I wanted everything, I had a really, really brilliant design engineer friend of mine come in on the project and help me with it.
What was his name?
Jim Duncan. And Jim is, one of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. Just a great guy, and we're friends. I mean, we go out to lunch and, still see each other. But his strengths are in product development and microcontrollers and writing firmware and that type of thing. So he's actually the guy that designed the electronic circuit and wrote the firmware that the digital microcontroller uses to control all the functions and to analyze the signals and make the correct displays. And there's so much about the meter I could go into. It's a very advanced product.
But he, to put it in layman's terms, which would benefit us, is that he wrote the computer program.
He did.
To control.
And actually, if you print out that software, that firmware as it's called, it takes 75 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. That's how much code is in that thing.
Wow. Well, since the Patriot Target AIM Pro meter, you actually developed another meter, isn't that true?
That is correct.
Okay, and that would have been the Insight Digital Display ID meter.
Right.
And that would have been also for the MindLab product?
Right. And as you can tell, I'm a MindLab fan. I mean, I love the Sovereigns,
Well, and that meter was for the Sovereigns. What's your views on the pulse induction machines that we're seeing so prevalent in relic hunting today?
Honestly, I've never used a pulse detector. I really don't have a lot of knowledge of them other than what I've read and what I've heard from people I've talked with. They're very specific to certain applications. A lot of water hunters like pulse units, especially if they're hunting saltwater. Relic hunters, yeah, because of the ability to handle extreme mineralization. Of course, some of the gold guys use them, but for the type of metal detecting that I do, I've had no need for a pulse unit.
Yeah, in fact, there's really not that great a discrimination on the pulse induction machines, and most applications, like you had said, it would be gold nugget hunting, and also for relic hunting, it really is something that gives the super punch for these guys who are down in the heavily mineralized areas, such as in Central Virginia.
Yeah, right.
I take it then most of your experience has been as a coin hunter?
Yeah, I'm primarily a coin hunter. I would say 90% of what I do is coin hunting. I do some relic hunting and a little bit of Civil War hunting now and then. I have a friend that lives down in Maryland, Virginia area, West Virginia. We get down that way.
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't have the heavily mineralized soil such as our viewers in Central Virginia would know, commonly called the wet dot. Me and Bill are familiar with them.
It's some of the meanest dirt I've ever metal detected in. And you know what though? I used the X3 down there, and my partner, Randy Ivy, God bless his soul, he just passed away just recently. He used the X2, and actually we did very well. And then at one time before these pulse induction machines, the X5 was the killer relic machine for even down there in the red dirt and the high mineralization of soil down there. And I still think that's still a great machine, you know, for anybody to use down there.
Now, when you're using that down there, are you hunting in all metal or discriminate?
I do discriminate, but I know a lot of them do all metal.
So you're just running very low discriminate levels.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And I hear you wrote the manual on the X3 and the X5, and
I did.
Did the field testing on that. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
You know, I don't recall how that started out. I don't know. I guess Troy had contacted me and asked me to do those, and I was more than happy to, you know, lend him a hand with it. So yeah, I actually produced, I wrote, did all the layout on the X3 and X5 manual. And I'll tell you, Troy, he was just a great guy to work with. I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, once I had the manuals in their draft mode, Amy Maruso helped me with proofing and editing, and so did Troy, to get the final product.
Right.
But in fact, you're still involved with new products in development. Is that correct?
Constantly. I have something right now that is very near completion. Again, a MineLab Sovereign product. I have a couple of issues that I'm concerned with that have to do with safety, and until I get that worked out, I wouldn't release it.
Right.
Okay. Well, as for the new products, is there anything you could tell us about what they are, their names, or you want to kind of keep that under your hat at the present time?
Well, if I tell you what the name is, it kind of would give you a pretty big hint of what the product is.
Okay.
Let's just say that it's something that is needed for a couple of the Sovereign models, the older models. And it's, again, as with most of my products, it's unique. It has some pretty cool features to it.
But in fact, you're not finished with doing ID meters. You're still working on the projects.
Well, you know, one of the things that, and I've got a lot of things on paper and in my mind, but because I had so much objection to the high price of the Patriot meter from a lot of people, I actually came up with a concept for a very basic type of meter that would sell well below $100 for the Sovereign.
Wow.
But, you know, the trade-off is you just don't get the performance or resolution that you would get with the Patriot.
But that's the point, Joe. You know, it's funny. People would complain about stuff like that, yet there's people, they're plunking down $5,800 for a GTX 5000 MineLab.
Well, yeah.
And I mean, if you have a machine that you could enhance in performance, target identification, $300 is not a lot of money for a precision handcrafted instrument.
And I mean, not to put down other people's products, okay? But that never made sense to me, because when I looked at how much went into the Patriot meter, the design time, you know, the component cost, and my time in building it, and then I look, and the same people that complained about paying $295 for that meter would think nothing of spending a couple $100 for a coil, or $150 for a set of headphones.
That's right.
And they're not nearly as complex as
Exactly.
you know. The Patriot meter is 100% surface mount, meaning, you know, very, very small, minuscule components. And I actually designed the printed circuit board, and I hand assembled those boards. I soldered every single little miniature part onto those. You know, I did everything. I drilled all the holes. I did all the wiring. I did all the, you know, 100% hand built.
Wow.
And you know, had to design and build all the test fixtures, the calibration fixtures. So there was quite a bit that went into it.
But you know, and I've used the analogy before. My opinion is on some of these pieces of equipment, it's like a musician paying the extra money to get a handcrafted guitar that he's going to buy and he's going to get use of. Really, you think about it, for what that meter does and what work went into in technology, the 295 was a bargain, Joe.
The proof is in the pudding, because, you know, now it's 10 years after the fact. That meter's been out for about 10 years. And they're actually selling for more now than when they were new.
Yes.
And a lot of people now are singing the praise of the meter and saying how good it is, where, at the time, I was taking all the heat for it being too expensive and it was old technology, and a number of people have said, well, why don't you build them again? And I can. I mean, I have all the equipment. I still have a lot of parts inventory. It's just the time factor. They are very labor intensive to build, and I'm a one-man operation. It's not like I have a factory and I can crank them out.
That's right. I mean,
So what do you think, Joe? If you got enough people saying they might want that product, would you?
Oh, I have enough people
make
right
them?
now. I've had plenty of people talk to me or email me directly and say, if you build that meter, I'll take one.
Wow.
I have a lot of things going on, and honestly, even when I was building them, I could only build 2 a day. I mean, that's if I sat in the basement 8 hours a day.
Right.
That's how much time it took to build 2 meters.
well, it goes back to what we were talking about before we started filming. I mentioned E.L. Scott radios, but what they're saying was they were the Stradivarius of radios.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could say these meters that you're the Stradivarius of these meters.
I don't know, maybe.
I mean, they're hand built, Joe. I mean, it's amazing.
I guess I know as a designer, and I know what's in it. I know how good they are, and a lot of people don't, and I can't fault them for that because it looks like old technology in a way,
But it took people like you and other designers to make technology grow and grow faster. And I've always said that about Troy Galloway and his shadow machines. I think if it wasn't for Troy being around at the particular time he was, we wouldn't have all this advancement in metal detecting and with these metal detectors, because he forced their hand to change their stuff to try to compete with him.
Yeah, and a lot of times, sadly, the innovators are just slightly ahead of their time sometimes.
That's right,
And
Joe.
and you're on that cutting edge, and sometimes it takes a while for other people to catch up and realize just what you have. And I chuckle every time I go on eBay or I go on one of the forums, and I see people buying the Patriot meter for way more than they were when they were new.
Yep. I look at you, I see Troy Galloway, because if it wasn't for you doing all the stuff you did, we probably might not have the advancements in these meters and everything too in these machines.
There's certainly a lot of good equipment out there today, so that would be a great compliment if I had a part.
Well, everybody has their part in it, and I honestly believe that.
Oh, thank you.
And it's like I had said earlier off camera. My opinion is it's like the example of Preston Tucker. He only built 50 cars, but the advances that he provided in those 50 cars, it paved the way for the future in automobiles. And I certainly believe some of these things that we've talked about today show that you had shown the future in metal detecting.
Well, I hope. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think it's proven.
It's funny too. I talk about my buddy Jim. That did all that development work on that. We had lunch a couple of weeks ago, and he's itchy to do another product. And I said to him, I said, well, Jim, right now I only have one thing that's nearing completion, and I said, that really doesn't require your skills. But
Right.
he was just telling me that he recently picked up a new development kit for a certain type of microcontroller so that he can,
Well, let me ask this, Joe. We talked, and everything's relative to market, supply and demand, what people would pay, and what's available. Had you ever considered doing, if not a limited run of these meters for people that are really interested? Have you ever considered the development, design, and production of an entirely new metal detector?
I have, and I actually have a few that I've designed over the years and done concept drawings of, and but that is a tough market. I mean, you have to be really well financed. That's way beyond the scope of anything I can do. And even on these small projects that I do, like the Insight and the Patriot and Blastmaster and all that, I always felt that if I would have had somebody backing me with money and marketing skills and the know-how to basically manufacture these offshore and all that, I think a lot of these products would have been a big success. But I was never well funded. I was bootstrapping myself, trying to do everything myself. Didn't have the finances to do it right. And although they were innovative products, it takes money to make them feasible and successful.
Sure.
Okay.